In this video, I'll explain what I think is the easiest and most efficient way to learn to read Japanese, and in particular, what I think is the ideal way to learn kanji. It took a very long time and a whole lot of unnecessary mistakes, but I did eventually learn to read Japanese, and reading doesn't pose much of a problem for me these days. I'm actually rereading the Harry Potter series in Japanese before I go to bed every night right now. I'm on book 7. To explain all this, first I need to take a couple steps back to explain how kanji are used. So, spoken languages are made up of sounds, which are called phonemes. In English, we use letters to represent phonemes, whereas in Japanese, they use kana to represent phonemes. There are two types of kana, hiragana and katakana. Hiragana are versatile, all-purpose characters. Katakana are often used for foreign loanwords or to show emphasis. There are also characters that contain meanings in addition to a variety of possible sounds. These are called kanji. Kanji literally means Chinese characters because these were imported from China hundreds of years ago. Sometimes one kanji represents one word, sometimes multiple kanji represent one word, and sometimes you have a mix of kanji and other types of characters to make one word. All in all, kanji add a lot of flavor to Japanese, and you might find yourself falling in love with them. In total, there are about 46 hiragana and katakana respectively. These can be learned pretty quickly, although you may find yourself struggling with katakana for a long time, even after you learned all the 46 characters. But there are plenty of free apps and videos and resources to learn kana for free. You could also do it on a free trial of Native Shark. I'm one of the founders, and maybe if you like it, you could go past a free trial and keep studying for years and years because we have so much Japanese learning content. In any case, learning kanji will take a little longer because there's not 46 kanji you need to learn. There are more like 2,200 or so. Don't panic, please. I know that sounds very intimidating, but learning kanji is a natural byproduct of an efficient Japanese study method. You will learn them if you have the right overall study approach. More on that in a moment. Kanji are your friend, not your enemy. Kanji can make learning Japanese words a lot easier. Thanks to kanji, you'll often be able to guess the meaning of a word, and knowing kanji can help you guess the pronunciation of words too in many cases. However, kanji can have multiple readings, i.e. pronunciations. Many Japanese learning materials avoid using kanji the way native speakers read and write them. I want to say this nicely. Please run away if you encounter some material doing this. Reading Japanese without kanji the way that they are normally used will slow down the progress of your reading comprehension. I'm sure that educators have good intentions when they dumb down Japanese in this way, but it is in fact counterproductive and a little condescending, and the reason it's counterproductive will become clear in a moment. Instead, please try to find a study material that writes Japanese sentences the way that an adult native speaker would write them for another adult native speaker. Bonus points if that material only teaches you one new concept at a time so that it's easier to work your way up to more advanced sentences. So how do we learn kanji? Very, very broadly speaking, there are 3 options that I hear people recommend the most often. The first is rote memorization. This is just when you write the character over and over again hundreds or maybe even thousands of times in an effort to somehow sear it into your brain. I find native speakers recommend this method a lot because it's what they were forced to do in school. It makes sense that they'd come to the conclusion that that's a good way to do it because they did learn to read Japanese, and that's what they were told to do while they were learning to read Japanese. But that's not in fact how they learn to read. That's how they learn to write, specifically to write from memory. And writing by hand from memory is not a particularly practical skill. It's something that you could do on the side if you wanted. The way native speakers actually learn to read is a little different, and it's something I'll talk about a little bit later. 2, there are mnemonic systems. A mnemonic system is when you take a kanji and you divide it into parts, and then you assign a keyword to each of the parts, and then you assemble those keywords into a phrase, a mnemonic phrase that will help you remember the meaning, one or more possible meanings of the kanji. More on that later as well. 3rd, and this is what I'm going to recommend, is the zoomed out approach. Notice that rote memorization and mnemonics are sort of zooming in on the kanji. We're getting closer to it to get a really good look at how it looks and like what strokes are used to create it. This seems like a reasonable approach, right? I want to learn this kanji, so I should know what it looks like. But is that how you read? Even in your native language, is this what's happening when you're reading? Let's try to read this together. It doesn't matter what order the letters in a word are. The only important thing is that some letters be in the right place. The rest can be a total mess, and you can still read it without a problem. This is because the human mind does not read every letter by itself, but the word as a whole. Could you read that? If you're a native speaker, I'll bet that you probably could. Brain science researchers say that if you can read it, your brain is processing words as a whole, not letter by letter. Japanese is the same. Your brain is a pattern recognition machine, and it turns out that when you're reading, your brain doesn't zoom in to find patterns, it zooms out a bit. Let me explain. So, a while back, a person in our Discord community posted a picture of these two kanji and said, so you're telling me that these two kanji are different? And yes, they are different, by the way. If you zoom in, you'll see that one has a shorter horizontal line on top and one has a longer horizontal line on top. And the one with a shorter line means something like not yet. And the one with a longer line means something like at the end. That's cool to know. But when you're reading Japanese, you don't need to zoom in to measure with like a ruler how long the characters of this kanji are in order to read it. Your brain will pick up on other patterns instead. For example, your brain will start to notice that the one that means not yet usually comes at the beginning of a word, whereas the one that means at the end usually comes at the end of a word. And zooming out a little more, your brain would also recognize the sentence in which this word is expected to appear. When you're reading a sentence, you can guess what word is coming next or what word should be there. And even more so if that sentence is in a rich context. So knowing all this, how do we use our brain's, processing systems to learn to read Japanese? Specifically Japanese that includes kanji. I'm not saying you can't write kanji by hand when you see them, or maybe with your finger. I'm not saying that you can't use mnemonics. We actually do include mnemonics at Native Shark even. We just don't make it the primary focus of your studies. We just need to also learn actual words that contain those kanji and to learn those words in sentences in specific contexts. For example, let's say we wanted to learn a kanji like this one, which means ease, comfort, music, fun, pleasure. It means all kinds of things, right? This kanji is actually has two other kanji in it. There's the one for white, the one for tree, and then it has these little things on the side of white, which is an element that can mean ice. So you can make up a mnemonic like an ice-covered white tree to look out through the window while you're at ease, comfortable, and in your house listening to music, whatever. So we can see a mnemonic like that. We could check the stroke order like this. Maybe copy with our fingers. And then having done this stuff, all of which is optional, by the way, you could just skip doing the mnemonic and the stroke order if you wanted. We can go learn it in words. For example, we could learn a word like tanoshi, which means fun or enjoyable. And you can see we learn a reading here for it, which is tano. The tano in tanoshi is one of the readings of this kanji. And we can learn it in a sentence, which could even be a one-word sentence like tanoshi. This is so much fun. You could say that, when you're doing something that is so much fun.
楽しい。
楽しい。
楽しい. Or we could learn a word like music, which is, sound that puts you at ease. Sound that's fun is music, of course. And you could learn it in a sentence like
どういう音楽が好き？
どういう音楽が好き？
どういう音楽が好き? So what kind of music do you like? What kind of music ga liking? If you see words like this in sentences like this enough, you'll just start to understand how to read those kanji. It happens naturally. It's a byproduct of what we're doing. Here we saw another reading of the kanji, which is gaku. The gaku in ongaku is one more reading for this kanji. And then later, maybe you'll go shopping online when you're living in Japan and you'll check out Rakuten and you'll realize that Rakuten is the ease heavens. It's a place that is so easy to shop. It's like heaven, I guess. Rakuten, and you could learn a sentence with that word in a specific context. For example, you're about to buy a can opener on Amazon. Before proceeding to checkout, you wonder if you can get it cheaper somewhere else.
楽天もチェックしてみよう。
楽天もチェックしてみよう。
楽天もチェックしてみよう. I'll check Rakuten too. Rakuten mo means like also. Checku means check. してみる is like to try doing. してみよう is like, I guess I'll try doing that. So I'll check Rakuten too. I guess I'll check Rakuten too. And here we see that the kanji can be read as raku. It's a third possible reading for that kanji. And you end up seeing so many examples like this that you just sort of learn to read. And I can't really explain why that happens. And I don't think anyone really can. But it's not just because you wrote a character a bunch of times or invented some cool story for it. It's because you saw the written word as it's meant to be read enough times that your brain noticed the pattern and started saying, hey, that's a pattern I recognize. I know what that means. And that's what reading is. So yeah, feel free to worry about the strokes in a kanji, or feel free to worry about parts that might be used to assemble it and what it looks like as a whole. But just please don't make that the main thing that you worry about. You also need to worry about what is this word in which it appears, and what does that word mean, and what sentence does that word appear in, and what context does that sentence appear in, and then repeat that for many words in many sentences in many contexts, and before you know it, you too will be in bed reading the book on your Kindle and just having a good time reading Japanese. It can happen. It just might take longer than you want it to, and I'm sorry for that, but I hope you enjoy the journey to getting there. Thank you for watching this video. Thank you for your time.
この番組はフューチャーラーニングメソッドネイティブシャークがお送りしました。